All right. Hey, everybody. This is Darren Francis with Signals in Higher Education. And today I have a special guest, Jillian Lowe from Virtual Internships. Jillian, how are you doing?
Doing well, thank you. A little chilly and otherwise excited to speak with you today.
Awesome. Awesome. So we connected, and you know that we're doing this kind of deep, lengthy series talking to both the partner companies that work in higher education, but also higher education leaders, talking about experiential learning, and right in your wheelhouse of the virtual internship space. So excited to talk to you about virtual internships, about all the things that you're doing. But I think in particular, what we really wanted to do today is we're going to dig into some timely research that you've been involved in on how AI is actually showing up in the internship space. So I think we'll get into all of that. But before we do, I also just want to try and uh, give people a perspective on like your background. And then also for those that don't know, I don't know who they would be, but for those that don't know, a little bit on virtual internships. And then we'll get into the AI research if that sounds okay. Awesome. So why don't we start with your background? I mean, you've been in the internship and education to employment space for I don't know about the last decade or so. Talk about your work, your role, how you got into it.
Yeah, of course. I think it's quite apt that my experience in education to employment and workforce development starts with an internship. So back 2008, I completed several internships in my undergrad. Actually, none of them came through my university or career center. I did find them on my own. But one of those experiences was with the Philadelphia Youth Network, a nonprofit. And it really just changed my understanding of the power of work based learning. They were running internships for high school learners. And the goal there really wasn't a job at the end, it was more persistence, keeping students in school by showing them mentors, by building that confidence and clarity about what the future could hold if you did have a degree, if you went on to post secondary education. And in that internship, I was a facilitator. I got to work with both employers and learners. And I also just had one of the most amazing managers I've ever had, who really modeled what strong supportive leadership actually looked like in practice. And so together, I got to mentor myself. I got to see the power of workplace learning. And it really dictated the next 15 years of my life because I was able to spend about 10 years working internationally with governments and institutions in New Zealand, Vietnam, Bosnia, and UK, all really focused on that education to employment pipeline in different contexts, different systems, and all really trying to deal with the same challenge. Education was teaching skills, and employers were hiring for experience, and there was a mismatch. And ultimately, that's been my North Star ever since, figuring out how we can create sustainable pathways to sustainable livelihoods and really doing that through education. And not just by teaching skills, but by giving learners the real opportunities to apply them in a labor market. And that's eventually what led me to virtual internships and where I've spent the last 8 years working on that problem and how to scale that problem both locally and globally.
Awesome. I'm just curious, what were you doing that gave you the international experience side of all that?
I was traveling on whims. I'll be honest with you. The second role was really lucky. I'm a huge rugby fan. Didn't think I'd get to say this in my in the podcast. A huge rugby fan. And once I graduated university, having played it all 4 years, I went to New Zealand on to see the Rugby World Cup. And they had this amazing visa called the working holiday visa. And so I went over there thinking I'd be a server. And instead I applied to this role and they're like, do you want to work for the Ministry of Business and Innovation supporting an upskilling program? I was like, well, yes, I do. And that kind of gave me this like reiteration that this was the right path for me and the right opportunity. I got to see it once again at that government scale. And then I kind of just continued following it with my passion of travel around the globe and leading back to the US eventually. But it was really more my drive of travel that led me to the opportunities abroad.
Sounds like you were like a dream hire for virtual internships. Like you lived it, breathed it, and then like sought out a role to do it full time in another capacity.
Yes. In fact, I remember when getting hired, my CEO was like, no, you have it. Like, you have all the internship experience, but you've actually done it in the most amount of countries that anybody has. So why don't we combine that? Because you're going to work with very diverse populations. So it was a great opportunity when it came to fruition in 2018.
That's awesome. And I'm just curious though, like, so you've gotten to see internships in a lot of different contexts. And then you've spent the last 8 years now at virtual internships. So, um, what has sort of evolved for you in your understanding of what works? What's how have you seen and how has your picture of the concept of the internship changed over time? Maybe would be another way to ask that.
I think for me, an internship remains just as impactful and important as it was 15 years ago. Potentially, if I had entered the workforce 30 years ago, I would have seen the rise of the internship and then the impact. But it's been about 20 years of persistence where we've really talked about this and the growth. But what really keeps me in it is that we haven't solved the problem. We haven't solved the problem of internships, and we certainly haven't solved the problem of education to employment pipeline, not in the US, not globally. And what we have is this really amazing system that provides internships to the top 30% of learners. And those learners tend to have networks, they tend to have social capital, early exposure, and a head start. And over the last 20 years, we've seen this really great persistence that 70% of learners still struggle to translate this education to opportunity, and we just can't figure out how to close the gap. And so this is what I've kind of seen is that internships are just as amazing as when I started. They're just as impactful. They are seen in greater demand, I think, than ever before, but we still haven't figured out how the 30% keep on getting them and then keep getting more and more and more. And we leave the 70% from their first internship so that they're never able to get that second, third, or fourth great opportunity and remain underemployed.
Hmm. It's a really it's a really good framing, and I can appreciate, especially for somebody that's as immersed in it as you are, that you you started this conversation observing sort of the equity lens this from the equity lens and persistence in education early on, and then also considering it in terms of persistence in terms of career outcomes. So why don't we back up a little bit more and just talk for a minute about those that might not know virtual internships, or they know the name but they don't fully understand as much about the company. Walk us through what you do. What's the problems? What are the problems that you're trying to solve at virtual internships, and who are your typical customers?
Yeah, of course. So, at its core, virtual internships is a guaranteed internship program. We promise students that if they complete our process, they will get placed into a real project based internship with a real host company. And we take responsibility for making all of that happen. And the problem we're solving is a massive coordination gap. There isn't a lack of demand from students. In fact, BHEF reported 8.6 million learners wanting an internship last year. And there actually isn't so much a lack of interest from employers either, although there was only 3.4, I believe, million internships provided. So a 4.6 million huge gap of internships. What we believe is there's a missing ecosystem that makes it easy for companies and universities, especially outside those elite networks, to engage at scale. And so we're trying to solve that engagement at scale piece. Internships really are still concentrated at a very traditional model: big companies, top universities, fixed locations, and a finite number, all in person. And that really leaves out the small, medium enterprises, as well as the global employers, those rural institutions or hard to reach institutions, and overall, just a huge, significant portion of really capable learners and students. And so we've built a global network of host companies and wrapped it in a support structured internship that they really need. This support includes structured projects, regular feedback and check ins, and guidance for both the students and the supervisors. And it allows in our ecosystem for students to build one profile, get support in positioning themselves, and then enter an internship designed to be a learning experience. And really, our goal is to meet demand by expanding that access for employers who want talent but don't have campus engagement, and for students who have the ability but not the connections to get the internships themselves.
Yeah. No, it sounds like a great recipe. And how does the institution you work with think about integrating this into the curriculum? Like, what's the best practice for where to offer, when to offer, how to offer, or do you just see that being just so diversely offered that there you can't make sense of it? I'm leading to something here, but I'm just curious, like what you're seeing.
So there's a quote I heard recently, and I just can't stop using it. But basically, if you've seen one university, you've seen one university. And that really captures what we see in our partnerships and what we see in how our partners integrate internships. Internships are super complicated. And one of the baseline complications of an internship is there's no shared definition, not at the campus level, not at the state level, not at the national level, right? And so it means that a 4-hour micro internship and a full 420-hour co op experience can both be called internships, even though those inputs are drastically different. And therefore, the outcomes, expected learning outcomes, impacts of employment, and more should be drastically different. And that standardization makes it really hard for universities to integrate over time, place, degrees, colleges, and more. And overall, some institutions have been doing internships for decades. They have credit bearing courses, they have the faculty oversight, they have really clear pathways, and they know what they want. They just need more internships. And others are earlier in the process. They know experiential learning matters. They know that learners are by and large asking for more career connected education and going to a degree to get a job, but they're struggling to have degree structure, faculty alignment, and more. And because of that, what I'd say is our partnerships are designed to be flexible and remain flexible because we need to meet the needs of the multiple institutions. Like I said, we've only seen one university at this point, right? And so we work with institutions offering internships for credit, also as co-curricular experiences, and sometimes just as a part of a broader workforce development or student success initiative. High level, at a strategic level, institutions usually come to us for what I call the 3 E's. It's enrollment, engagement, and employment outcomes. Most everybody thinks you do internships just for employment, but what we really see is the enrollment and engagement or retention coming to the forefront. And that priority actually shapes who owns the partnerships internally, how it is funded, and how it is integrated. And that means it could come at the beginning, so you have more enhanced career clarity or connections, or it could happen at the end if you're looking at that post-program employability and that final launch pad. So really, institutions are using us in a myriad of ways. They all look a little different. They all need us, and they are all focused on some of the key struggles in enrollment, engagement, and employment. But it's how it looks within the institution that is changing time and time again.
No, it's a great view into it, and actually, I really appreciate the kind of across the curricular perspective from a student journey perspective that you see happening at different schools. We see it too. I'm wondering about are you able to standardize on like the delivery, or do you find that based on some of these different scenarios, institutions are requiring a significant amount of change in terms of, oh, it's going to be curricular, so therefore we need to have our instructor oversee elements, or it's co-curricular and we need it just to fit into this shorter period of time. How many flavors of internship does virtual internships have to deliver in order to accommodate all these different use cases?
Well, We have one standard model. Now, each and every individual internship looks very different because there's an amazing company and a supervisor that is going to change the element of how the student engages and whatnot. But the standardization of the number of contact hours, the placement project plan, which is our approach to taking a job description, which an employer very much understands, and a syllabus, which a faculty very much understands, and creating a shared language, weekly feedback loop so that we can capture a student's reflection and a learner's and a supervisor's feedback. All of those inputs are standardized. And so all of those come regardless of the institution. Now, what changes a little bit is potentially our parameters of where we can place the learner and the parameters of what data and how rich the data is that we give back to the institution. We're already capturing all the data, but sometimes for co-curricular, they might not need all those verification of hours. They might not need the essay or a curriculum completion. But if you're looking at 4 credit programs, they might need a little bit more. But we have captured it for all, and there's that standardization. And so when we look at institutions being a little different, I think what you find is that an institution that can make it curricular, integrated into the degree, has better buy-in, higher student engagement, and higher student outcomes. As soon as you make it co-curricular, you've made it optional. And now you're depending on, hey, will a learner see that a degree is mandatory, but an internship is optional and only do one, and then therefore not have that industry aligned experience and that really strong hiring signal at the end? Or will a co-curricular experience just not have the backing? And so that's really what's changing it. It's just where the students are funneled in and how they engage with the program. But the program that we deliver, the standardizations, and the need to meet the academic requirements stays across the board for all institutions. Sometimes we just give a little less of the data we capture or a little bit more, depending on institutional needs as they assess our programs.
Yeah, that sounds great. And it makes sense to me that virtual internships would have a tremendous amount of flexibility and can fit into the curriculum or alongside of, regardless of the situation. I imagine that in the more optimal scenario where you're embedded in the curriculum, that you have to go through various, as you said, that one you've seen one institution means you've seen one institution. The process for approval and maintaining the credit worthiness can be different and sort of a moving target for you at different institutions. Like, how do you guys approach that? And if that's not your area, that's totally fine. But I'm just curious because it feels like one of the you're hitting on a crux of issue around where do we embed this, and we know we want it in the curriculum, but sometimes we put it alongside because it's actually really difficult to get it into the curriculum. So having experienced, having done it, I'm just curious how you guys approach that.
Well, I mean, to take one step back, I think a lot of institutions are still trying to figure out should it sit in the curriculum. One of the reasons why is because if you put it in the curriculum and you say you have to do this to get a degree, you now need to make sure you have the breadth of internships to make sure everyone can get the internship to graduate. And that's the hard part, right? Is employer connections. Northeastern has a beautiful co-op program. It's built on 100 years of experience and a 250-person staff. Now, if I go tell all universities, go hire 250 people and give everybody an internship, you can easily put it part of the degree, but not everybody has those resources. So some of the barriers to entry of making it curricular isn't always getting it accredited, is do we have the resources to work with this many industry? The second piece is also, do we have the time and space to fit this in? We find that employers would like longer experiences with the interns because they take so long to onboard, to get comfortable, to build rapport and understand the workplace culture. I find that universities by and large are saying, look, can you actually guarantee our students an employment outcome, but only give them a 20-hour internship? And you go, I don't know if I can do both at the same time because they might not actually get what you're looking for in a 20-hour experience. That's a project that's not really learning how to manage up and learning how to manage down and learning cross-functional engagement, workplace culture, shifting priorities, and more. And so the shift of do I have time? Am I having time space in my 120 credit course? If I just made a 90 credit degree, do I have space in there? That's a big challenge. So resources and time can often be the biggest constraints to accredited programming, not just the accreditation themselves. But when we do work with institutions for accreditation, usually I ask the simple question, have you given credit for internships before? And if the answer is yes, things can usually move very quickly because we're just fitting our internship model into their accredited model. And the academic structure already exists. And the job is to align the data we capture, which is hours, contact hours between the supervisor and the learner, supervision, feedback, and guidance and learning outcomes, to what the institution already needs for accreditation. And in many cases, schools already have the internship course. The problem isn't credit, and it's just that the students can't find the reliable internship, as I noted. But when things break down, it's when there's no shared precedent. So one college has offered internship credit for years. They go to their other college, they'll never offer internship credit. The other one doesn't even know what an internship is. And at that point, the challenge isn't often accreditation or logistics, it's just alignment. We need to decide what they're trying to assess, what's required for credit, and where flexibility is acceptable. And the simplest for us is if schools want to move now, but don't have an accredited program, we have a school of record. We've accredited our program ourselves to make sure a learner could get transfer credit. And so through Excelsior University, students could earn transferable credit. And that means that we could offer an institution a really nice pilot program that is accredited, see the outcomes, see where it fits into an institution, and take things step by step before going to that 3-year accreditation process, because we know that's lengthy and we know internships are needed now, and how that works can really be done in parallel.
That's a great model. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and gives just the right amount of flexibility to enter just about any institution. Um, I love that. So let's pivot to something else that I think is going to get us closer to our AI discussion, and it's related because one of the things that I've been surprised to hear discussed in the context of experiential learning and internships and apprenticeships is is this old academic concept of authentic assessment, right? And this it's being revived around the idea that, oh no, AI entered the world. Now we don't know if students are submitting ChatGPT's homework assignment or their own ideas. And we're using sophisticated AI to try and decipher whether or not students actually did the work. And again, we're judging based on outputs, which are easily manipulated. So therefore, authentic assessment, we're looking at an alternative where you're actually evaluating potentially a group of students going through a project-based learning assignment, or you're looking at a student's participation working with an employer and being able to gauge a lot of these different things. I'm just curious, like from your perspective, do internships in your mind help solve this problem? I mean, at least partially for universities around assessment.
I think internships push us in the right direction of authentic assessment. They don't eliminate the challenge, but they shift it. Employers have been for a long time amplifying where they place in order of hiring preference internships, because it is real world experience. It's their way to do an authentic assessment. It's saying, hey, you might have gotten an A on a course, but now I can actually see you have verifiable work experience on your resume, and that's a better stamp of approval. But what AI is doing in the education sphere is absolutely, it's exposing limits of the traditional assessment. I think we all saw the New York Times article last year that said blue books were bought at the highest level they have been in 20 years. And really that question of when students can generate essays, code, problem sets, do trigonometry with all the AI, it really becomes harder to tell what they actually understand, right? Versus what they can prompt or what they can ask AI to do. And internships really do allow us to change the question. Did you produce this artifact? Did you write this essay too? Can you function in a real work context? And in the workplace, performance is really beautifully observed over time in a very natural way. It's about how someone communicates, responds to feedback. It's about how you manage ambiguity and collaborate with others and apply skills in a context. And that is almost impossible to fake. You can fake maybe a one off interview if you turn your camera off, but with AI, it's very hard to fake. And so that really gives us this authentic picture of readiness, that authentic assessment that we are all seeking. That said, internships introduce a new assessment challenge, and this has always been a challenge of internships, is that workplaces aren't standardized and supervisors aren't trained graders. Feedback can be very subjective. I've had very harsh bosses, I've had very lovely bosses. They were giving me similar feedback but very different levels, right? And so if institutions just assume internships are automatically authentic, they can actually lose a lot of rigor as we work through different things. And so we really need to figure out what that means. Moreover, we need to make sure that we don't lose its authenticity through putting it through institutional standardizations. So, really, the key is structure. Internships support authentic assessment when they're paired with clear learning goals, when they don't replicate assessments, and when they're placed in the workplace, and they can really help expand performance. But it needs to be intentional. It needs to make sure it's not the only assessment that's happening in a degree. And it needs to be making sure that we don't erode, once again, authenticity for standardization as we try to meet employers and universities where they both are at.
Yeah, yeah. No, well said. And now we're getting into the heart of the world of of this research, I think too. So, talk about what is the AI integrated integration research project um, that you helped oversee or participated in. Talk about virtual internships involvement in it. Just give us kind of that high level, and then we can start to talk more and peel back a bit more on that topic.
Of course. Well, I mean, it's no surprise to you or anyone listening, but AI has been flashing across every industry, every news article, and it's just been this constant topic. And what we kept coming back to at virtual internships was just a very simple question. We see all these premonitions of the future, but what is actually happening right now? Not what people will predict, but not the hype and not those sad metrics that are coming out, but what interns and supervisors are really experiencing on the day to day. And at the same time, we experienced, and I'm sure all of you have heard this too, a lot of rhetoric around the entry level work disappearing, fewer internship postings, fewer junior level roles or entry level roles, and really this idea that AI could wipe out the entry level role altogether or turn hiring into this very diamond shaped experience. And given that internships are what we do, we thought it was very important to understand that because it could further impact our supply and demand challenge and more. And so we really, really wanted to understand whether AI was making that challenge worse, changing it, or reshaping it in ways that we potentially weren't naming yet. And we were lucky because we work so closely with internships. We're delivering them consistently. We have students on the ground as we speak right now doing an internship. And because we operate across industries, geographies, and environments, we felt that we could really get ahead of this, that we had the right stakeholders to reach out to find out what was happening with AI in internships. And so we really just wanted to figure out that real time window of how AI was showing up in internship work at the end of 2025. And so ultimately, the core question we were trying to answer was how is AI being used inside internships right now? And what does that mean for the future of entry level work? And if we could establish a benchmark today, we could better prepare students and institutions for what's coming next. And potentially, I haven't told this to my boss, but potentially repeat this research over time so that in 2026 to 2007, we could build a timeline of that AI acceptance, adoption, and usage to continue that better preparation of learners into the entry level workforce.
So maybe then walk us through what you did. Like talk about the the heart of the data that you were pulling together.
Yeah, of course. So we conducted interviews with 15 participants across 9 global companies and 6 intern alumni, alongside survey data from over 100 supervisors and former interns, all whom had completed an internship within the last 6 months. And it's important because learners came from a wide range of degree programs and institutions from across the globe, and host companies spanned multiple industries because we wanted to capture a broad sense of AI in internships. And that breadth was really important to us. And it's also important, though, on the back end to note that with any study, there is limitations, and our data is self-reported and comes from an active platform. We've done other research where we went outside of our platform and really wanted a broader scope. But this reflects institution and employers who are maybe potentially already a little bit more agile because they are using remote internships. But the goal here wasn't perfection. It was clarity in a very fast moving paced environment and early quick adoption of AI to get data out, to get that benchmark so that we can continue expanding and doing bigger and better and more research in the future.
Yeah. I mean, did you have like an initial hypothesis, and how did that in your mind get proven or disproven or adjusted?
Yeah. So going into the research, I had a few clear hypotheses. So first, I expected interns to be entering the workplace with a general awareness of AI. Like I said, we've seen it splashed across the news. It's a very apt topic. But I also expected a lot of confusion shaped by the inconsistent guidance from their institutions. Different universities have very different standards across AI use, and those standards have evolved over time of adoption from 2023 to 2026, where we sit now. And so I assumed that an uncertainty would carry over into how interns approached AI at work. Secondly, I really expected employers to be really open about AI and in some case using it potentially at a higher level than interns themselves. My assumption was that companies might be experimenting with AI in practice while interns might still be unsure what is allowed, what's appropriate, how transparent to be, and what should happen. And honestly, my third expectation was that the findings might be fairly dire. We were reading the headlines. They're telling a story about entry level work becoming replaceable and internships losing value. I've spent my whole life thinking internships were the bee's knees. And so I was embracing myself to hear employers say, like, ugh, the work could have easily been done by AI, or find confirmation of a more pessimistic narrative. And so I did go into this research very intentionally open minded. I wanted to test those assumptions and understand what was really happening and not just reinforce the headlines I was already absorbed in. And so my goal really was to surface that real grounded picture. And I think I was able to do so. So we found that some of my hypotheses were absolutely confirmed. The first one, that learners were confused by the wildly different university standards around AI use, very true. But I don't think universities would even be surprised by that. And I think we're getting more clarity as time has approached. But these are learners in the tail end of their degree, and that confusion, they've seen the whole gamut of 2023 up to 2026 run through. And I found that the second hypothesis also held true. Employers were really open to AI. In fact, 88% of our employers actively encouraged interns to use AI. And 81% reported being satisfied with the outcomes of interns' use of AI. And so, what I didn't expect, though, was how extensively interns were already using AI. The range of tasks they were applying to, I think, was bigger and broader than initially hypothesized. But most importantly, what truly surprised me was how optimistic this research was. 0% of our companies surveyed said they were planning to decrease internship opportunities over the next 12 months. 43% said they were actually planning to increase it. And none of the companies had reported a layoff tied to AI. Instead of talking about AI replacing an intern, a lot of companies also talked about AI amplifying interns' ability to contribute, to get more up to speed, really taking it to the next level. And from the learner side, we heard something really interesting. Interns didn't experience AI as a replacement. They actually experienced it as a remover of boring admin. They helped them get unstuck quickly. They helped them get out of admin and data entry into the next level where internships could be more interesting because AI was an unlocker of knowledge. They were able to focus more on judgment, critical thinking, human elements, and just find work just a little bit more interesting than they had. So ultimately, I had a few hypotheses. Some were validated, but overall, the coolest thing about the report was it was vastly more optimistic than the headlines had given, at a very more micro view of what internships looked like in the workplace.
That's really great. Your findings kind of from the employer side. I want to just hit on that like separately for a second because um, I wonder is it is part of maybe the success metric here the type of employer? Like, do you have? I mean, you went across. Would you say 15 different employers
Mhm.
plus your other survey data? But like when you went deep with these 15 globally, do they happen to be of a certain size or a type of employer or a type of project? Is there any other similarity that would sort of make this make sense, or are you saying you're finding this across a lot of different industries, a lot of different company sizes? Help me unpack that part of it.
Yeah, of course. So it really was not degree specific, nor was it industry specific. So, what I would say is the vast amount of companies that we work with are small, medium enterprises. So, they were all less than 300 employees at any given company. But they were all very different. So we had a wealth of industries: market research, healthcare, fintech, software development, computer science. And then we had within those tasks from different learners. And so what I would find is that the biggest difference of industry was just the policy maturity and their risk tolerance of AI use. So, for example, I spoke with a healthcare company, and AI use was heavily shaped by data governance. They were just a little bit more hesitant. They absolutely still wanted the intern to use AI, but they had a little bit more rules, regulations, and they already had policies written to kind of shape how that was done because their focus was on what data could be shared, what was private, what posed a risk if it went into an LLM. Compared to a marketing company who largely worked with public domain content, they were like, yeah, just use AI to get it done quicker, better. I don't care. Go for it. So the variation really wasn't about capability. It was more about the rules and regulations and context. The final thing that we did see was that there was a bit of nuance in technical roles. And this particularly came out with coding. So employers and interns were using coding at the same rate as they expected to do that. And I think we've all seen companies or industry talk about vibe coding and how powerful it can be and the risk of vibe coding and more on computer science learners. But we had several employers actually say they were clear interns needed to build foundational skills first to be able to even unstuck the challenges of the vibe coding in the future. And so they had a ramp up period that was very different than like our marketing industry. Our coders and our software developers always said that they tried to get the learner to not use AI at first and only apply AI once they had verified some foundational technical skills, where we had other industries be like, use it now and use it quickly. But ultimately, we did our research because we didn't want to focus on one industry. We didn't want to focus on one degree of university. We wanted to get a wide breadth of across the globe. And we found that the capacity and the capability, I don't think was higher because of the different industries and whatnot. In fact, what I've seen from different research of small medium enterprises and large is we're using it at the same thresholds as well. So I don't think there was a big change in that. I think more it might just depend on what foundational skills are needed potentially before you get to the AI, or what rules and regulations can put a guardrail around the AI use.
Okay, this makes a lot of sense. I want to think about this a little bit from the university perspective now. Um, I mean, what should universities do with this information? Should students prepare for internships differently? Uh, should AI be taught as like a separate component? Obviously, you mentioned like in the coding scenario, yes, but like just fundamentally, how do you feel like universities can benefit from the research around AI in internships?
Yeah, of course. Ultimately, I actually think universities are taking AI very seriously and in many cases doing some great work. We spoke to a student from University of Southern California, and he gave this great example how he had three courses, and one was really high in writing, so it was absolutely no AI. But another one was more research, and they taught you where AI was acceptable. You just had to denote that. And then the final piece, he said, he was using AI 90% of the time because it was marketing, and that was the future of marketing. And so I think there's some really great things happening in university because we're seeing institutions go through their syllabi and courses to clarify where AI is used, where it is allowed, where it isn't, and what kind of AI skills are being introduced. And that shouldn't be in a separate course. AI is fundamentally integrated in every aspect of our lives. So let's not put it out there. Let's not make it co-curricular. Let's not make it one course. Let's do what they're doing right now, which is map it to the degree. Don't make it an additional course. And I think that they're doing it amazing. Some universities are further along on AI readiness and than they are on other workforce capabilities, but AI has really forced that level of mapping and intentionality I haven't seen. Where I do think they need to do something different is one, keeping pace with industry. This was already a reality. It was already a challenge before AI, but the only way to keep up with industry is really to embed it, to have it be embedded in it. And that means more internships, more experiential learning. It means creating more opportunities for students to step outside the classroom, which is a little bit more static and slow to react, even though they've been quite quick to react to AI, and really apply both their technical skills and their AI skills in real world environments who have the quickest, fastest, and highest rates of adoption of AI, and where expectations, tools, and workflows are constantly changing, and the only place for them to be able to keep up with industry. Ultimately, though, not looking at AI, it's really shown a second gap. And this gap also existed before AI, but AI has really amplified it, and it's durable skills. And I'm sorry, I just for as many times as we say AI and you read in the headlines, I think we're all reading about durable skills. But interestingly enough, universities took AI and they did a beautiful systematic work of their syllabi, degree, and courses and mapped where it fits. But we haven't really done the same kind of systematic work to map where students are actually developing judgment, decision making skills, critical thinking, communication, and teamwork across the degree. And we haven't given learners consistent language, assessment, and tracking to understand where those skills are being built and how to articulate them to employers. This is one of the biggest gaps of the liberal arts degree, which is so beneficial, but that transferable to articulation to employers, but it's across all degrees. And so I think if universities want to better prepare their learners for internships in the name and the face of AI, it's not about teaching AI tools, which they are doing and need to continue doing, but it's also about pairing that work with intentional development of those durable skills and then giving students repeated applied opportunities to practice both. I do bang the drum. Internships are one of the most effective places to do that. But it really is also now the enabler of keeping up with industry's quick shifts of AI while we work within the static nature of the degree.
Yeah, well said. I think that I think when we talk about durable skills and in the context of higher ed's really good at creating standardization, actually, and standardization is really important for what you're asking for, right? The gaps that we've always seen around skill is the translation of what I say a skill is to what you, the employer, says a skill is. And there's some really great companies thinking about this right now and thinking about creating like the taxonomy of skills and really trying to be the translator between the industry and education such that you could actually backward mask the skill onto the syllabi and actually build that back out in meaningful ways. Um, so I like the way you're thinking about this because it's because ultimately the goals that we're talking about that I think virtual internships help facilitate is getting us to a place where we're getting more students the level of experience necessary to have meaningful work and employment. Um, so let me then back and let's go the reverse direction for a second. So what about this? Are there skills or approaches that are becoming less relevant because of AI? Like, are there, you know what I mean? Like, is there some aspect of skill that just no longer feels relevant due to AI?
What I'm about to say doesn't mean that it's not relevant, but knowledge or the ability to recall knowledge is now not actually as important. LLMs are houses of a vast amount of knowledge, and we keep giving them more. So it's less about can I retain and recite knowledge, much like a test used to do. What year was this war? How did it impact? What was the repercussions? And more about can I ask the right questions? I think that is one of the biggest shifts is how we teach that decision making skills and that judgment. It is just an overlay of our past curriculum, but really putting it into a different context. And I think that's going to be the difference between a really great amplified intern versus an intern who's using AI, but without those amazing contexts. And there's that tale of two interns, one getting skyrocketed because of AI and the other not. And it's that secondary layer. We did ask both employers and interns, hey, rate these three skills. And I kept it very broad. And I just said, in the importance of it, applying to an AI enabled workplace. And that was durable skills, technical skills. And then I added a third category, AI specific skills. And AI specific skills remain dead last. Durable skills ranked both first by employers and students, and then technical skills. And so I think that we are continuing to look at the skills we have and figuring out which ones need to be focused on more, maybe articulated more. And the second piece is, can we actually add more questioning and that prompting as we build in tools that give us the knowledge at our fingertips, which before we never imagined. And does that change how knowledge is transferred, shared, or discussed within the education system? Absolutely. And does that then change how we're prepared for internships? It should. Besides that, I think all degrees have an opportunity to come out on top in this AI infused workforce. There might be some cuts right now, but it's still actually unclear whether those cuts are being done for AI in the face of AI taking the job or in the face of tech companies investing in AI for future. And that means that there's a lot of computer science right now going, what am I doing in AI? But it's unclear if their skills were completely replicated or if just funding was reprioritized to a new investment, not their own.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I All right. I want to ask you about the anxiety in the market, um, about AI potentially reducing the number of entry level opportunities, right? And um, you guys work with it. I think you work with 20,000 employers. Is that roughly right? So, what are you actually seeing? Is the opportunity landscape going to shrink? Like, do you uh, feel like there's new opportunities emerging because of some of this? Like, what's your read on it from just the vantage point you have with so many employer partners?
Yeah, of course. I think the first thing is that a surprising point or a surprising theme that came out of our research is what I call a tale of two interns. And this actually was really crystallized in the interview portion. And across all these interviews with these companies, I just kept hearing the same story. AI dramatically amplified some interns, and these were the interns who asked better questions, applied this amazing judgment and critical thinking, and used AI as a collaborator, added context and more. And it really helped them to get unstuck faster. I tell you, it gives you that knowledge edge where if you are a young professional, institutional and industry knowledge is one of the biggest barriers to grow. But now you have this tool that can help give you some of this context. It can really take what was a good intern and turn them into a great intern. And employers talked about this with real excitement. It changed how they thought about the potential of future interns and turned them from kind of annoyances to these really great potentials. But on the other side, right, tale of two interns, the story wasn't as clear. Some interns really treated AI outputs as finished work. They didn't add context, they didn't do anything. And really, what happens is AI just didn't elevate them, it really exposed them. And worse, employers are already a little stretched for internships. It requires mentorship, it requires time, it requires patience, it requires working with a new generation. All of that is tiring. And so when these interns gave this data that looked like carbon copy of an AI output, they thought, oh, well, I don't really need you in this case. I could have just used AI. And so it took that okay intern to AI replaced, and it took that good intern to great. And so that gave me a little bit of confidence. It means that there's actually a lot of opportunity in this workplace to create an AI amplified intern and to get more companies actually excited about working with across generations, across mentorship, across time and resources, because they might get a little bit more ROI or a little bit more impact early on. It did make me realize that we have a lot more work at the university level and at the training level to make sure we didn't have any okay interns, that we all were enabling them to also use context, use judgment, and to get amplified by AI. And so, yes, internship postings are down. I would be apt to say it wasn't. It's 17.5% year on year out is the Brookings Institute. Job postings for entry level jobs are down, and recent graduates are having the longest terms of unemployment that we've seen in a while. But we are also seeing in the internship, our employers haven't decreased internship opportunities just yet, and 43% are increasing. So there is this great opportunity that could happen. Right now, also, though, we have this other challenge of not what's happening in the entry level job, but how do you get the entry level job? And this was a surprise that I didn't actually expect to research in my research, but what we found was asking interns, hey, is it going to be easier to find a job in the future? 71% said yes, it was going to be easier in the next year to get an internship or a job. And I thought, that can't be right. They've read the news articles, right? Like we're reading the same thing. And when it initially made no sense, we dug deeper and we found that learners were really talking more about the application process. Resumes and cover letters were annoyances, but now with the help of GPT, you could just get them done in a second. And they were aligned keyword to job description. They were perfect to the company, and it was very, very easy to apply en masse. And interestingly, I had no questions about resumes in the survey. I did have a questions about what you were looking for hiring and more, but nothing specific about resumes. And in every last one of my interviews, my employer said, "Hey, by the way, I thought you were going to talk about this. What am I supposed to do with all these applications I keep getting?" I was like, "What applications?" They're like, "We've about tripled, quadrupled the number of applications we get per job. They're all indistinguishable. They're perfect. They don't really tell who the candidate is, but they're matched perfectly to my job description. What do I do? The hiring signal is eroded." And so that really stuck with me is right now we're in this place where some companies are frozen. They don't know if to hire more. They don't know to hire less. They don't know if to invest more in AI or invest more in humans. So that's creating a gap in the hiring. But the second issue is everybody's using AI to apply, so no one's getting hired is the second issue. And we are fundamentally facing a challenge of an erosion of a traditional hiring signal. If everybody has access to a tool that makes it shiny, beautiful, and keyword aligned, then is that a usable tool anymore to distinguish quality? And what does that mean? And so I think right now there is decline in internship postings and jobs. There is movement and big names like AWS and Amazon laying off 16,000 as they invest more into AI, all impacting the job market. Long term, though, it could be more that we just need to work to amplify more of those interns, and we need to figure out what's the new hiring signal. Is that work experience? Is that a portfolio? Is it capital? Is it connections between a university and an employer directly to overcome what AI has eroded?
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing the hiring signal piece into the conversation because it's, when we think about uh, business to business related marketing and communication, the thing that always comes out is authenticity is what drives engagement now, right? Like you're better off as a brand on LinkedIn actually using the individual voices of your team, um, sharing a quick video of themselves, uh, or writing a short post than you are putting up a flashy, graphic and investing in professionally produced video content. And it's just because the signal, right, has been valued in the marketing context to have authenticity be the brand. It's the thing that gets beyond the AI, right? And so now you're saying in the hiring world, um, you need to find the equivalent in order for the right signal to emerge, which I think is a great challenge, one that you're right. Higher ed needs to be a part of. Um, Higher ed needs to be at the table with employers thinking through this, for sure. And um, yeah, really great insights and perspective today. What did I not ask you about this research? Because I feel like there's you dropped so many new things for me to think about, but I'm wondering if are we missing any aspects of what the research was uncovering.
I think because so many universities listen, and I think they're grappling with so many different asks with the same amount of resources, it can be quite overwhelming. So I would like to point out one more overwhelming thing, the research, which is I asked qualitatively, hey, in an AI enabled workplace, who is most responsible for ensuring a learner is AI ready? And when I asked qualitatively, interns, universities and companies all said a beautiful answer. Like, we're all really going to have to rise to the occasion. We're all going to have to step up to the table. Universities are the best at learning development. They create beautiful courses. They're going to be there. And employers, we're going to be there to apply the workplace knowledge and really amplify them to my industry and my company needs. And it was a great answer. And I thought, yes. But then I gave them a survey and they didn't have time to give me words. I just said, rank it. Um, 5% ranked employers first. 95% of learners and employers ranked either the learner or the university as the most responsible for AI readiness in this next hiring. And as we look at those diminishing placements and numbers and more, I think that's really important because what we speak qualitatively can always sound beautiful, but if it comes push to shove, we're all expecting universities to make everybody job ready. That is challenging. We're already expecting that, but with AI enablement, we're even expecting more. And navigating that, staying up to industry needs, and really trying to push back on what the industry can take on and what university can will be really important in understanding if everybody says we're going to train, then probably no one's going to train. And we need to figure out what that ecosystem looks like for the future of employment and that education to employment pipeline.
Wonderful insights across the board here. I really appreciate that you took the time to unpack the research. I think the opportunity for institutions to drive more internships through partnerships with companies like virtual internships, but also to have a resource in you, and through the research that you've done to help them make the case to thinking through this in a more strategic way. Um, I loved everything from how we place internships into different areas of the curriculum and alongside the student journey to help a student go from exploring a career to persistence and retention and engagement, all the way to employability. You used the three E's, now I remember, right? So it was enrollment, engagement, and employment. And I think I loved the framing of that. And I loved the way you brought AI to bear into an ever changing world of internships. So thanks again for taking the time, Jillian. This has been wonderful.
Well, thank you. It's been wonderful to discuss. And like I said, I hope that I'm able to do more research so that I'm now able to compare and contrast 2025 to 2026, and we can build a knowledge house of the continuous adoption and changes of AI. But ultimately, as it positively changes internships and can amplify that experience, is my hope, and get more companies and universities on board to providing these experiences.
That's awesome. And as you do, let's have another conversation. I would love to keep it going.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Appreciate your time.